Fenerbahçe versus Galatasaray. The Intercontinental Derby is a geographical and cultural explosion, the most vicious football rivalry in Turkey, and a fight for supremacy over Istanbul, the only city spanning two continents. Started in 1909, the rivalry is defined by the Bosphorus Strait. Fenerbahçe represents the traditionally Asian side, while Galatasaray represents the European side. The rivalry is famously tight, with Galatasaray achieving the greatest Turkish football feat with their 2000 UEFA Cup win, a moment of international recognition their rivals have never matched. The rivalry is intense enough that players who cross the divide become instant traitors. The iconic moment of dramatic escalation was the 1996 Turkish Cup final, where legendary manager Graham Souness escalated the tension to a breaking point. After his team's victory, Souness provocatively planted a giant Galatasaray flag in the centre of Fenerbahçe's pitch, almost triggering a full-scale riot that required extensive police intervention. A more recent viral moment was the 2019 match, where an injury-time red card resulted in a mass brawl on the pitch involving nearly all the players and substitutes, perfectly demonstrating the rivalry's raw volatility. This rivalry is less about points and more about honour and ownership. Winning the Intercontinental Derby means owning Istanbul for the entire year and claiming the emotional upper hand over the opposing continent. FC Barcelona versus Real Madrid. This is the most political and culturally significant rivalry in world sport. A political civil war fought in cleats. The feud began in the early 1900s, but the hatred intensified after the Spanish Civil War, when Madrid represented Spanish nationalism and central authority, while Barcelona embodied Catalan separatism and regional pride. Real Madrid was long seen as the Franco-backed establishment club, a perception that fueled the resentment of the Catalans. However, the arrival of Johan Cruyff revolutionised Barcelona into an ideological counterforce, leading to a shift in footballing philosophy. The rivalry was thrust onto the global stage and reached its most competitive modern height during the relentless, iconic goal-scoring battle between Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. The cultural clash is fundamental: the royal crown versus the rebellious spirit. The rivalry's drama is encapsulated by two defining moments: the ultimate betrayal of Luis Figo's return to Camp Nou in 2002, where a pig's head, a whiskey bottle, and mobile phones were infamously thrown at him. Even more visceral was the moment Real Madrid's frustration boiled over during the 5-0 thrashing in 2010, which culminated in defender Sergio Ramos receiving a straight red card for a brutal, late tackle on Lionel Messi. In the ensuing brawl, Ramos shoved his Spanish national teammates, Carles Puyol and Xavi, a desperate, chaotic act that personified the sheer hatred of the rivalry. Every time these two giants meet, it determines the political and footballing balance of power in Spain and Europe. The rivalry between Wisła Kraków and KS Cracovia, known as the Holy War, is one of the oldest and fiercest football derbies in Europe. Both clubs were founded in Kraków in 1906, and their stadiums are separated by less than a kilometre. The first recorded match took place in 1908. Historically, the rivalry has been charged by socio-political undertones. Wisła was associated with the state police during the communist era, while Cracovia has controversially adopted a Jewish identity. This adoption is deeply evident in their fan culture. Cracovia supporters frequently use Jewish symbols, flags, and phrases, such as Jude Gang being the name of their most prominent hooligan group, as a form of confrontational counter-identity against their rivals. This hostility has often spilled over into serious street violence and hooliganism, earning Kraków the unfortunate moniker, the City of Knives. This deadly nickname stems from the fact that the two main hooligan firms, Wisła's Sharks and Cracovia's Jude Gang, were the only major groups in Poland to famously refuse the 2004 Poznan Pact, a nationwide agreement among hooligans to ban the use of weapons, including knives, in organised fights. This rejection led to a unique and sustained period of extreme violence in the city, resulting in multiple high-profile stabbings and fatalities. On the pitch, Wisła Kraków holds a superior historical record. winning 13 Polish league titles compared to Cracovia's 5, though Cracovia famously won a crucial playoff match in 1948 to claim the championship. The atmosphere at the derby is always volatile, characterised by elaborate typhos, constant chanting, and the heavy use of pyrotechnics, making it a highly charged event both for Polish football fans and international observers. Ajax versus Feyenoord. De Klassieker is the fierce battle for cultural and financial supremacy between the Netherlands' two largest, most influential cities, Amsterdam and Rotterdam. The rivalry began in 1921. Ajax has historically dominated the league and European stage, defined by the Cruyff-era European titles of the 1970s and the team's total football philosophy. Feyenoord's success, though less frequent, is fiercely celebrated by its devoted fans as an act of defiance against the capital's arrogance. Amsterdam Ajax fans see themselves as sophisticated and artistic, while Rotterdam fans pride themselves on being hard-working and true to their tough Port City roots. The infamous 1997 Battle of Beverwijk, a massive, organised pre-match fight between hundreds of hooligans from both sides in a small town, tragically resulted in the death of a supporter. A key on-field moment was the 1980 pitch invasion, where an Ajax keeper was attacked, which led to a 15-year stadium ban for Feyenoord fans in Amsterdam. Due to extreme, recurrent fan violence, visiting supporters have been officially banned from attending this rivalry for years, proving its intensity is deemed too high for public safety. Red Star Belgrade versus Partizan Belgrade. The Eternal Derby is one of the world's most ferocious and politically charged spectacles. A raw, volatile clash between two state-backed clubs, often fueled by political ideology, nationalism, and mass hooliganism. Both clubs were founded in 1945 by rival factions of the Yugoslav communist regime. Red Star associated with the Interior Ministry, while Partizan was backed by the Yugoslav army. This political origin embedded itself in the rivalry's DNA. Red Star achieved the ultimate glory with the 1991 European Cup, cementing their legacy as the nation's most successful club internationally. The intensity is personified by the Deligi and Grobari ultras groups, who are known for their spectacular choreographed pyrotechnic displays, constant pitch invasions, and the open display of extreme Serbian nationalism. The iconic moment is the 2017 clash that resulted in the arrest of 26 people and multiple injuries after a huge brawl broke out in the South Stand between two rival factions of the Partizan Ultras themselves, a chaos that spilled onto the pitch and required intervention by anti-terrorist police. This is not just a game. It is a brutal, chaotic, and political struggle where the Ultras' identity is intrinsically linked to who owns the soul of Serbia. Liverpool versus Everton. This is a unique, deeply personal family rivalry defined by immediate geographical proximity and an intense fight for bragging rights across the city. The feud began in 1892 after a crippling rent dispute saw Everton abandon their home stadium, Anfield, and relocate to Goodison Park. The stadium's owner then defiantly founded Liverpool FC to take over the empty ground, creating a rivalry literally born from a legal fight over property. Liverpool has always been the more dominant side, especially during the 70s and 80s, which led to a resentment that simmered under the surface. The rivalry is unique because families, and sometimes even players, are divided between the two clubs. It truly splits the city. This familial division is personified by players like the famous defender Jamie Carragher, who grew up an Everton fan before joining Liverpool. The emotional and unifying 1989 FA Cup final, played just weeks after the tragic Hillsborough disaster, was a rare moment where the rivalry gave way to shared grief and solidarity for the city. The most iconic moment of controversy was the 2018 stoppage time goal by Divock Origi, where he capitalised on a fumble by Everton keeper Jordan Pickford, scoring in the 96th minute in a moment of sheer, devastating luck for the Blue Half. Olympiacos versus Panathinaikos. The derby of the eternal enemies is a relentless, class-driven battle between Piraeus's working-class port and Athens's cosmopolitan elite. The rivalry started in the 1920s and immediately became symbolic of Greece's political and social divide. Olympiakos as the club of the working class, sailors, and the port city versus Panathinaikos as the club of Athens's wealthy, established elite. Olympiakos has utterly dominated in the modern era, particularly the last 3 decades, establishing an iron grip on the league title and becoming the nation's preeminent club. Panathinaikos proudly boasts a richer history in the 1960s, including being the only Greek club to reach a European Cup final. The fan bases are arguably the most extreme and violent in Europe, frequently engaging in violence, pitch invasions, and chaotic stadium atmosphere. The tragic 1982 match, where Olympiakos fans celebrated a victory that led to a crush and stampede, killing 21 fans, forever marked the rivalry with a devastating human toll. A more recent viral moment was the 2014 match, where Olympiakos fans displayed a banner that mocked the death of Panathinaikos president Pavlos Giannakopoulos, leading to international condemnation and perfectly summarising the rivalry's shocking lack of restraint. This volatile hatred extends beyond football to basketball, water polo, and volleyball. When these two meet, it is a desperate, volatile, all-consuming feud where defeat often requires heavy police presence and full squad protection for the losing team and its management. Paris Saint-Germain versus Olympique Marseille. Le Classique is a modern cultural and social fault line, a clash between the elite, capitalist North and the passionate, working-class South. Though it started in the 1970s, the rivalry was commercially manufactured in the late 1980s by Canal Plus to boost viewership of the National League. Marseille dominated the late 80s and early 90s, becoming the first and only French club to win the Champions League. The script flipped forever with the 2011 Qatari takeover of PSG, which introduced an era of unprecedented financial dominance and guaranteed Parisian supremacy. PSG is the club of the glamour, wealth and celebrity of the French capital, viewed as cold and manufactured, while Marseille represents the gritty, working-class, multi-ethnic and passionate port city of the south. The most iconic moment of extreme animosity was the 2020 match that saw 5 red cards and a mass brawl break out in stoppage time, with Neymar accusing an opposition player of making racist comments, leading to global headlines. The infamous 1993 match-fixing scandal involving Marseille also solidified the deep distrust between the clubs. This is a battle for the soul of France. When PSG wins, the capital celebrates wealth and aristocracy, and when OM wins, the people declare a revolution for the south. Benfica versus Porto. O Clásico is the definitive Portuguese war between the north and the south. The rivalry started in 1912 and quickly evolved into a clash between the metropolitan elite of Lisbon and the northern industrial working class of Porto. Benfica dominated the 1960s, securing 2 European Cups led by the legendary Eusebio, establishing themselves as Portugal's historic giant. The script decisively flipped with the emergence of Porto under José Mourinho in the early 2000s, who won the Champions League and shifted the balance of domestic power to the north. The rivalry is defined by the lasting shadow of the Bela Gutmann curse, placed on Benfica after his firing. When refused a pay rise, he famously declared, "Not in 100 years from now will Benfica ever win a European Cup." This enduring curse and Porto's constant defiance define the feud. Porto's club president, Pinto da Costa, defines the club's rebellious, northern resilience against the capital. The iconic moment of dramatic reversal was the 1990 match, where Porto defeated Benfica 3-2 on the last day of the season to snatch the title away from their rivals, thanks to a controversial last-minute penalty scored by Geraldão. The defeat was crushing for Lisbon. For Portugal, O Clásico is more than a game. It is a national referendum, a bitter battle where Lisbon's curse-shadowed aristocracy clashes with the North's rebellious defiance. Arsenal versus Tottenham Hotspur. The North London derby is an eternal, bitter feud born from a betrayal and defined by the annual battle for local superiority. The rivalry's origin is unique. It started in 1913, when Arsenal controversially moved their club south across the River Thames into Tottenham's traditional territory in North London. The core betrayal occurred in 1919, when Arsenal was promoted to the top flight via a disputed, allegedly corrupt vote, replacing Tottenham in the league. Arsenal dominated the Arsène Wenger era, holding a psychological edge for decades. The cultural battle is often symbolised by St. Totteringham's Day, the day Arsenal fans celebrate mathematically securing a finish above Tottenham. The ultimate act of humiliation occurred in the dramatic 2004 match, where the Invincibles clinched the Premier League title directly on Tottenham's White Hart Lane pitch. The ensuing celebration was legendary and unforgivable. This rivalry is relentless, often decided by last-minute goals, and ultimately dictates which set of fans can endure the next 6 months of local ridicule and who gets to claim the true pride of North London. Napoli versus Juventus. The Derby del Sole is the ultimate Italian socio-economic and geographic clash, a cultural battle between the wealthy, industrial north and the passionate, struggling south. The rivalry intensified dramatically in 1984 with the arrival of the deity-like figure Diego Maradona at Napoli. Before his arrival, matches were rarely competitive. Afterward, they became symbolic of the South, rising up in an act of glorious rebellion against the establishment. Juventus has maintained a relentless financial dominance over Italian football, acting as the national powerhouse for generations. The Maradona era, 1984 to 1991, provided Napoli its only 2 championships, monumental feats that tasted like revolution. Napoli embodies the pride, desperation, and soul of southern Italy, viewing victory over Juve as a potent political and social statement against the affluent, controlling north. The defining moment occurred in the 1987 match, where Maradona led Napoli to their first ever Scudetto title, officially dethroning Juventus and triggering the most iconic citywide street party in Italian history. A more recent key moment was Gonzalo Higuain's controversial €90 million transfer from Napoli to Juventus in 2016, an act of betrayal that ignited a fresh wave of visceral hatred towards the north. This is not just a match, it is a social and political contest where the glory of the South is measured solely by the successful, defiant humiliation of the North's arrogant aristocrats. Manchester United versus Liverpool. The Northwest Derby is a bitter industrial war, a generational conflict between England's 2 greatest footballing cities. The feud is rooted in the 19th century Industrial Revolution, specifically the completion of the Manchester Ship Canal in 1894, which bypassed the port of Liverpool and undercut its shipping trade. The 1970s and 80s were the eras of Liverpool's dynasty, with multiple league titles and European Cups. The script decisively flipped when Sir Alex Ferguson arrived at United, famously declaring his single mission was to knock Liverpool right off their perch, a task he completed by dominating the 1990s and 2000s. The rivalry is defined by legends, Kenny Dalglish and Steven Gerrard clashing with Eric Cantona and Ryan Giggs. The dramatic 1999 FA Cup 4th round, where United scored 2 goals in the last 2 minutes to stage an impossible comeback, was a crucial defining moment on the way to their historic treble. Another iconic moment was Gary Neville's infamous celebration in front of the Liverpool away fans in 2006, leading to a huge fine but cementing his legend as a die-hard anti-Liverpool player. The rivalry's modern toxicity was perfectly captured by the racially charged Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra conflict, which exposed the lingering, bitter animosity between the clubs. For the fans, winning this particular game is a victory more satisfying than the league itself, representing the ultimate triumph in Sir Alex Ferguson's completed mission to knock Liverpool right off their perch. Fiorentina versus Juventus. This is a simmering, yet deeply personal battle born from player betrayal and Florentine resentment of Turin's cold, calculated dominance. The rivalry intensified in the 1980s when both teams fiercely battled for the Scudetto, a title ultimately and controversially decided in favour of Juventus. The ultimate unforgivable betrayal occurred in 1990 when Roberto Baggio, the world's best player and the beloved hero of Florence, was controversially sold to Juventus, sparking violent riots in the streets of Florence. Juventus has always been the wealthier, more dominant club, using its financial muscle and reputation to continually poach Florence's best talent, a factor that fuels Fiorentina's defiant pride. Baggio's painful transfer defined the personal aspect of the feud for a generation. The iconic moment of defiance was when, playing for Juventus in 1990, Baggio refused to take a penalty against his old club, even as his Juventus coach Giovanni Trapattoni angrily yelled at him to do so. He later picked up a Fiorentina scarf thrown onto the pitch, a singular emotional act of loyalty amidst the hatred. Another key moment was the 2013 demolition, where Fiorentina came from 2-0 down to defeat Juventus 4-2 after a stunning second-half performance, a rare victory against their hated rivals that was celebrated like a title win. This is a battle over stolen players and denied championships, a rivalry where Florentine artistic passion and provincial pride always clash violently with Turin's relentless industrial efficiency and power. Bayern Munich versus Borussia Dortmund. Der Klassiker is the modern clash of German footballing ideologies. While a rivalry for decades, the intensity truly emerged in the 2000s as Dortmund became the only consistent threat to Bayern's domestic dominance. Bayern has maintained consistent dominance by ruthlessly applying its financial power, often by famously signing Dortmund's best players, including Robert Lewandowski and Mats Hummels, a practice often jokingly referred to as Hoeneßing, after former club president Uli Hoeneß, who solidified the strategy of crippling rivals by signing their star players. The Jurgen Klopp era flipped the script briefly, securing 2 Bundesliga titles and challenging Bayern's throne. The rivalry is defined by generational talent, who often switch sides, and the passionate coaching feud between Klopp and Pep Guardiola. The most iconic moment was the 2013 UEFA Champions League final at Wembley, the only time the two teams have met for European football's ultimate prize, which Bayern won 2-1 on a decisive late goal by Arjen Robben, a crushing defeat for Klopp's golden generation. This rivalry doesn't just decide the German title, it determines whether the Bundesliga remains a true competition or returns to being a predictable one-club parade. Sevilla versus Real Betis. El Gran Derby is the desperate battle for the heart and soul of Seville, an emotional clash defined by the city's deep-seated class and aristocracy versus the common people. The rivalry began in 1909 and immediately took on social significance. Sevilla was founded by the wealthy establishment, while Real Betis became the club of the spirited working class and republican identity. While Sevilla has historically been more successful, especially on the European stage with multiple Europa League titles, the passionate, uncompromising heart of Betis ensures a continuous, volatile challenge. The 2007 match where Juan de Ramos, Sevilla's coach, was struck by a bottle thrown from the Betis stands, collapsing on the pitch and forcing the game's abandonment, remains a defining moment of extreme violence and volatility against a coach in the derby's modern history. The 2014 Europa League elimination, where Sevilla defeated Betis on penalties at Betis's home ground, was also a moment of crushing local humiliation sealed on European soil. The entire city shuts down for 90 minutes because this intense, fiery battle for Andalusian pride is the only thing that matters. As Roma versus Lazio, the Derby della Capitale is the most vicious, emotional, and politically charged local derby in Italy. A raw fight for the identity of Rome itself. The rivalry began in 1927 when the fascist regime attempted to merge all of Rome's smaller clubs into one entity. Lazio defiantly resisted the merger, establishing themselves as the eternal anti-establishment club and setting up the fundamental left-right ideological clash. While Roma has historically been the more successful, dominant club in the city, the rivalry is characterised by extreme volatility and passion, frequently resulting in multiple red cards. The core of the feud is political, with the teams famously divided by extreme ideological wings. Lazio is historically and visibly associated with the far right of Italian politics, while Roma fans traditionally lean toward the left wing. The feud is personified by one-club legends like Francesco Totti versus Alessandro Nesta. The dramatic and often repeated iconic moment was Francesco Totti's selfie celebration in the 2015 derby after scoring a brilliant equaliser, where he ran to the Curva Sud and took a photo with his cheering fans, a highly viral act of dominance over his rivals. The tragic 2004 match was also abandoned after false rumours of an incident involving a police car and a child triggered a massive pitch invasion and civil unrest. This is an annual explosion of political, social, and cultural tension that consumes the Eternal City for weeks. Juventus versus Inter Milan. The Derby d'Italia is the battle between Italian football's historic aristocracy and the ultimate symbol of integrity, a rivalry forever poisoned by a defining scandal. The rivalry was formalised as the Derby of Italy because for decades they were the two most successful teams that had never been relegated. The 2006 Calciopoli scandal, which sent Juventus down, left Inter as the only club with this historical distinction. Juventus has traditionally been the financial and trophy powerhouse, maintaining a relentless dominance built by the wealthy Agnelli family. However, Inter's success under Mourinho established them as the only true competitor that could survive Turin's overwhelming financial power. It's defined by contrasting captains and personalities. The loyalty of Alessandro Del Piero versus the tenacity of Javier Zanetti. The 2006 Calciopoli scandal, where Juventus was stripped of titles and relegated for match fixing, solidified the bitterness. This act became Juve's lowest moment ever, and Inter was subsequently awarded one of the stripped titles and forever claimed the moral high ground. Inter fans still refer to Juventus as ladri, thieves. The most iconic moment of on-field controversy occurred in the 1998 match, where referee Piero Ceccarini failed to award a clear penalty to Inter's Ronaldo moments before Juventus scored the winning goal, a moment of perceived institutional conspiracy that Inter fans still rage about. Every game since is a battle for moral authority and legitimacy. Inter fans use the scandal and its aftermath as proof that Juventus's dominance was fraudulent. Schalke 04 versus Borussia Dortmund. The Revier is the defining working-class rivalry in Germany, a passionate, intense battle for pride over the industrial Ruhr heartland. The rivalry began in 1925 and is rooted in the neighbouring cities of Gelsenkirchen and Dortmund, both historically defined by coal mining and steel production. The proximity and shared industrial identity fuel a raw, visceral animosity. Schalke dominated the pre-Bundesliga era of the 1930s and 40s, winning multiple titles. However, Dortmund became the more dominant, successful club in the modern Bundesliga era, especially in the 1990s and 2010s, giving them current bragging rights. This is a pure working-class derby, defined by the tough, honest values of the industrial region, and the hatred is instilled in fans from birth. The Ultras' loyalty is unbreakable, leading to some of the most spectacular, coordinated choreographies and pyro shows in Europe. The incredible, viral 2017 match, where Schalke came back from a shocking 4-0 deficit against their bitter rivals to secure a dramatic 4-4 draw on the road with a 94th minute goal, is known forever as Das Wunder von Gelsenkirchen. Another specific moment was Jens Lehmann's 1999 red card, when the Schalke goalkeeper deliberately stomped on a Dortmund opponent, a visceral act of aggression that perfectly symbolises the derby's brutality. When these two passionate clubs meet, the entire industrial region stops. It is a bitter, dirty, beautiful, and sometimes violent contest for the eternal crown of the Ruhrpott. Ajax versus PSV Eindhoven, the Eredivisie Klassieker, is a financial and philosophical battle between the Netherlands' two primary powerhouses, Amsterdam's artistry versus Eindhoven's corporate efficiency. The rivalry intensified in the 1970s and 80s as PSV, heavily backed by the global Philips Corporation, emerged to consistently challenge the domestic and European dominance of Ajax. The rivalry represents two different paths to success. Ajax has historically produced the most talent through its famed academy, adhering to the total football philosophy. However, PSV achieved a historic moment by winning the 1988 European Cup and securing a treble in a single golden season, a victory for corporate pragmatism. The most iconic moment of title-swinging drama was the 2007 final day victory by PSV, where they needed a 3-goal swing against Ajax on the last day of the season to win the title, and spectacularly did so, beating Vitesse 5-1 to secure the trophy by just 1 goal. Another key moment was the 2018 demolition, where PSV demolished Ajax 3-0 late in the season, effectively clinching the title. This annual struggle for the Eredivisie crown often decides the destination of the title, controls the transfer market, and shapes the identity of the national team's tactics. AC Milan versus Inter Milan. The Derby della Madonnina is a sophisticated battle in the fashion capital, a rivalry split between the city's foundational principles. The rivalry began in 1908 when a faction of members broke away to form Internazionale, specifically because they wanted a club open to foreign players and a more cosmopolitan international membership. This contrasted sharply with AC Milan's more Italian-centric origins. The 1980s and early 90s belonged to the defensive mastery of Arrigo Sacchi's AC Milan, but Inter finally found consistent dominance in the late 2000s under the controversial Jose Mourinho, defined by the greatest defenders and playmakers to ever grace Italy, Maldini and Baresi versus Ronaldo and Schneider. AC Milan historically represented a more Italian-centric foundation, while Inter was seen as the club of the city's cosmopolitan international elite. The infamous 2005 Champions League quarter-final, abandoned after an Inter fan threw a flare that struck AC Milan keeper Dida, is symbolised by the iconic photo of rival players Rui Costa and Marco Materazzi standing side by side watching the fire. Another viral moment of sheer drama was Zlatan Ibrahimovic's infamous clash with Romelu Lukaku in the 2021 Coppa Italia quarter-final, where both strikers were booked after an explosive face-to-face shouting match that involved vicious personal insults about their families and rituals.